Every story needs a catalyst, an event so profoundly misguided it sets in motion a cascade of disasters. For our story, that catalyst is Benito Mussolini deciding he needed a win of his own. By late 1940, his German ally was collecting countries like stamps, and Mussolini, bless his heart, felt left out. So he looked at a map, pointed to Greece, and presumably said, "That one. It looks easy." On October 28, 1940, Italian troops marched from Albania into Greece, a date chosen for its historical significance and, apparently, with a complete disregard for the local weather report. Because nothing screams military genius like launching an invasion into the rugged Pindus Mountains right as the brutal Balkan winter is setting in. The Greek army, who were supposed to roll over, instead fought back with a ferocity nobody in Rome anticipated. The glorious Italian advance quickly turned into a panicked Italian retreat, with Greek soldiers pushing them all the way back into Albania. It was less of a conquest and more of an embarrassing, mud-soaked camping trip. In Berlin, the mood was less than festive. The German High Command was in the middle of planning the largest land invasion in human history, Operation Barbarossa, the knockout blow against the Soviet Union. Everything was scheduled down to the minute. Then the phone rings. It's Rome. Mussolini's little adventure hadn't just failed, it had created a gaping wound in the Axis southern flank. The British, ever opportunistic, started landing troops and aircraft in Greece to help out, which meant RAF bombers were now potentially within range of the Romanian oil fields at Ploiești. Those oil fields were the lifeblood of the entire German war machine. Losing them wasn't an option. So, with a sigh that could probably be heard across Europe, the German leadership had to put their grand Soviet plans on hold to go bail out their overambitious friend. It was the geopolitical equivalent of having to postpone your wedding because your best man tried to deep fry a turkey in the garage and set the neighborhood on fire.
Meanwhile, Yugoslavia was trying to walk the world's most dangerous tightrope. Its regent, Prince Paul, was a realist. He saw the Wehrmacht steamroll France and concluded that antagonizing this particular neighbor was a bad career move. On March 25, 1941, after immense pressure, his government signed the Tripartite Pact, officially aligning with the Axis. The Serbian people, however, were not realists. They were Serbs. They flooded the streets of Belgrade chanting "Bolje rat nego pakt," better war than the pact. 2 days later, on March 27, the military, led by Air Force General Duan Simovi, launched a coup, ousted Prince Paul, and put the 17-year-old King Peter II on the throne. It was a stunning display of national pride and defiance. It was also, from a strategic perspective, like slapping a hornet's nest with a fish. The German leader, who was not known for his calm and measured response to personal insults, immediately ordered the complete and utter destruction of Yugoslavia as a state. The German response was not just swift, it was pathologically efficient. On April 6, 1941, without a declaration of war, the Luftwaffe initiated Operation Punishment. This was the terror bombing of Belgrade, a city declared open to spare it from destruction. The Germans ignored this. For days, bombers flew in waves, deliberately targeting not just military installations, but cultural centers, libraries, and residential areas. While the capital burned, German armored divisions poured across the border from Austria, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. The Royal Yugoslav Army, while large, was a relic. It was poorly equipped, ethnically divided, and deployed based on political fears rather than sound military strategy. German panzers sliced through their lines. Stuka dive bombers shattered their morale.
In just 11 days, it was over. Yugoslavia unconditionally surrendered on April 17. The country ceased to exist. You've probably had leftovers in your fridge for longer than it took the Wehrmacht to dismantle an entire nation. With Yugoslavia collapsing, the path to Greece was now wide open. The Germans didn't even have to break a sweat bypassing Greece's heavily fortified Metaxas line along the Bulgarian border. They just drove around it, through Yugoslavia. Another victory for lateral thinking. The Greek army, already exhausted from months of fighting the Italians, now faced the most formidable military machine on the planet. Alongside them was W Force, a contingent of British, Australian, and New Zealand troops. Their presence was more of a brave political statement than a credible defense. It was a classic fighting retreat. The Allied forces were constantly outflanked and hammered from the air, falling back through legendary locations like Thermopylae. Yes, that Thermopylae, where a small Anzac force staged a heroic rearguard action to delay the Germans. History does enjoy its reruns. Ultimately, it ended as it had to. Another mass evacuation, with over 50,000 Allied soldiers rescued by the Royal Navy from the beaches of southern Greece. The British were getting exceptionally good at leaving the continent in a hurry. But the Germans weren't done. The island of Crete was still in Allied hands, a strategic aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean. Conventional invasion was risky because the Royal Navy owned the surrounding seas. So, General Kurt Student proposed a novel solution: take it entirely from the air. Operation Mercure. It was bold, innovative, and completely insane. On May 20, 1941, the sky over Crete filled with German transport planes and gliders. The elite Fallschirmjäger, the German paratroopers, began to drop. What they dropped into was a buzzsaw. Allied intelligence, thanks to ultra-intercepts, knew the plan. The defenders, a mix of battle-hardened Anzacs and ferocious Cretan civilians, armed with everything from muskets to kitchen knives, were waiting. The paratroopers were slaughtered as they descended. Their drop zones turned into killing fields. The first day was an absolute catastrophe for the Germans, especially around the critical Malem airfield. The entire invasion hung by a thread, dependent on capturing that one strip of land. The Allies had one job: counterattack Malem airfield that first night and wipe out the handful of exhausted Germans clinging to its western edge. They failed. A series of command hesitations and communication breakdowns meant the opportunity was lost. That hesitation was fatal. The next day, the Germans, despite horrific losses, managed to secure the airfield and began flying in mountain troops. That was the ballgame. After 13 days of brutal fighting, Crete fell. Berlin hailed it as a glorious victory, a testament to the new age of airborne warfare. But behind the scenes, the numbers told a different story. The elite 7th Air Division was annihilated. They lost nearly 4,000 killed or missing, many of them experienced officers and NCOs who were irreplaceable. The losses were so shocking that the Germans never again attempted a large-scale airborne assault. They won the island, but sacrificed their entire airborne arm to do it. It was a Pyrrhic victory of the highest order, like winning a boxing match but suffering career-ending brain damage in the process. So, what was the point of all this? Germany now controlled the Balkans. Mussolini's pride was salvaged, sort of. The British were kicked out of Europe, again. But the real consequence was all about timing. This entire chaotic, bloody sideshow, from the first bombs on Belgrade to the last shot fired on Crete, had taken 2 months.
Operation Barbarossa, originally planned for mid-May, was pushed back. The invasion of the Soviet Union finally launched on June 22, 1941. Those 5 to 6 weeks were the most critical of the entire war. They were 5 weeks of dry weather the panzers could have used to race across the steppe. Instead, by the time the Wehrmacht reached the gates of Moscow in December, they weren't met by a defeated Red Army. They were met by general winter. Mud, snow, and temperatures that froze engine oil solid. The offensive ground to a halt. Mussolini's ill-fated Greek adventure, started out of pure ego, had indirectly given the Soviets the one ally the Germans could never defeat: the Russian climate. The road to Stalingrad didn't begin in Russia. It began in the mountains of Albania. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!